Shalom and welcome to Yeshua in Context. I'm Derek Lehman. You can find me at dereklehman.com. That's DEREKLEMAN.com. And also at YeshuaInContext.com, you can not only find all of the videos that we post here, but hundreds of articles on topics related to the Gospels and the life of Yeshua, and especially the Jewish background of Yeshua's life. The text is about catching the life and message of Yeshua the Messiah in his context so we can better follow him in our own. When the very Jewish Gospel of Matthew tells us the story of Messiah's birth, you can bet it's going to be filled with Jewish themes. And in fact, the infancy story of Yeshua in the Gospel of Matthew has more Jewish themes than most readers realize. In this podcast, I want to share some little-known background about the magi who came from the east and about the Star of Bethlehem. Let me share with you a few of the resources that I regularly use in preparing these vodcasts and in writing articles and in studying the Gospels myself. First, I always want to read every Gospel portion in the Delitzsch Hebrew-English Gospels, a new translation of Delitzsch's Hebrew New Testament, the Gospel part of it at least, by Vine of David. Also, a very new product is the Jewish Annotated New Testament. A lot of great background notes and references and sources to primary information like the Second Temple literature, the writings of Josephus and Philo, and the rabbinic literature that relate to the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. And for this podcast, I am drawing a lot of my information from Raymond Brown's book, The Birth of the Messiah. One of the greatest books I've ever read, something I've returned to many times over the years, again and again, to find great nuggets of information. Let me begin explaining the Star of Bethlehem by sharing a little background that you may not have considered to the story that's in Matthew about the Magi and the star. And that background is actually found in the Torah, in Numbers chapters 22 through 24, in the stories of Balaam, the Babylonian diviner/prophet, who was sent to curse Israel, but every time he tried to curse Israel, he blessed them. In Numbers 22 we read, "The Israelites then marched on and encamped in the steppes of Moab, across the Jordan from Jericho. Balak, son of Zippor, who was the king of Moab, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was alarmed because the people were so numerous. Moab dreaded the Israelites and said to the elders of Midian, 'Now this horde will lick clean all that is about us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field.' Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor in Pethor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinfolk, to invite him, saying, 'There is a people that came out of Egypt, and it hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Come then, and put a curse on this people for me, for they are too numerous for me.' Balak sent Balaam 4 times to curse Israel, but every time Balaam set out to curse Israel, instead all he could do was bless Israel. In fact, God's blessing through Balaam's prophecy is so beautiful that we begin the morning service in the synagogue with one of his blessings that was supposed to originally be a curse. And then, I know you're wondering what all of this has to do with the Bethlehem Star. Well, Balaam says this in Numbers 24:17. "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush through the forehead of Moab, and tear down all the sons of Shet." Are you starting to see it now? Can you imagine the connection between the Balaam story and the birth story of Messiah? Let me read the Bethlehem Star story from Matthew 2, and I'll read from the Delitzsch Hebrew-English version of the Gospels. "In the days of King Hordos, when Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Yehuda, Magi came from the land of the east to Jerusalem. They said, 'Where is this king of the Yehudim who was born? For we have seen his star in the east, and have come to bow down to him.' When King Hordos heard their words, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. So he assembled all the leading priests and scholars of the people, and inquired of them, saying, 'Where will Mashiach be born?' They told him, 'In Bethlehem of Yehuda, for this is how it is written in the prophet, You, O Bethlehem, in the land of Yehuda, are not least among the chiefs of Yehuda. For from you will go forth a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel. Then Hordos summoned the magi secretly and began questioning them to find out the time when the star was seen. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go, thoroughly search out the matter of the boy. When you have found him, tell me, so that I may go and bow down to him too. When they heard the words of the king, they departed. And the star they had seen in the east moved in front of them until it came and stood still over the place where the child was. They saw the star, and they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. They came into the house, found the child with Miriam his mother. They fell upon their faces and bowed down to him. Then they opened their treasures and presented to him a gift of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They were commanded in a dream not to return to Hordos, so they departed to their land by a different route. Now let's make a few comparisons between the story of Balak and Balaam on the one hand, and the story of the birth of Messiah on the other. First of all, you might compare King Balak to King Herod. Also between the two stories, you could compare the eastern diviner Balaam to the eastern magi who come to the birth of Messiah. And of course, the Star of Jacob can be compared to the Star of Bethlehem. Finally, the scepter in Judah that Balaam spoke about in his oracle could be compared to Messiah, the King of the Jews, born in Judea. So what we have here really are two stories about Eastern seers perceiving a king in Israel with a vision of a star. Now what about the star itself, the Bethlehem Star? The Magi said, "We have seen his star in the east." There are a number of theories about the Bethlehem Star, and Raymond Brown in Birth of Messiah discusses the three main options for the Star of Bethlehem. And the first is that it could have been a nova or a supernova. Periodically, a star explodes and sometimes suddenly becomes visible. It's even happened in history that novas or supernovas were visible in the daytime sky. Johannes Kepler first suggested the idea that the Star of Bethlehem might have been a nova. Another common theory is that it could have been a comet. Throughout history, people have frequently associated comets with important events that might happen in history and also with the birth of kings. Really bright ones are rare, and the brightest is Halley's Comet, which appeared 6 years before Yeshua was born. And some people have thought that Halley's Comet appearance in 12 BCE could have been the Bethlehem Star, although it's rather odd to think that something 6 years before Yeshua was born could have been a sign to the Magi. Finally, there's the theory of a planetary conjunction, which is when the orbits of planets cause them to appear very near to one another in the sky. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars had a very rare conjunction in the year 7 BCE. Yeshua was probably born in 6 BCE or maybe 5 BCE. So about a year before Yeshua was born, there was a conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. How rare is this triple conjunction? It only happens every 805 years. Now, late Jewish sources, not Christian sources, mind you, but late Jewish sources from the Middle Ages referred to some ideas about astrology that could possibly have bearing on our story. If the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars occurs in the constellation of Pisces, it suggests the last days and the people of Israel. Saturn, in ancient astrology, suggested Syria or Palestine, and Jupiter suggests a world ruler. Could the signs of the birth of Messiah have been shown in the stars to astrologers from Babylon or Persia or Arabia? That seems to be what the story is about, and a planetary conjunction would seem to be what the Magi saw in the east. But wait, you might be saying, a planetary conjunction doesn't sound like what happened in Matthew chapter 2. After all, we read, "The star they had seen in the east moved in front of them until it came and stood still over the place the child was." How could the Bethlehem Star be a nova, a comet, or a planetary conjunction if it moves and points the way to a house? Well, we have to realize something. In Matthew's story, there are essentially two Bethlehem Star incidents. Number one, from Persia or Babylon or Arabia, some magi saw a sign in the stars that led them to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem. Number two, After leaving Herod, these magi saw the star do something very un-star-like. It moved through the sky, and it came down low over a very specific house, pointing the way. Now, we could reject the story as impossible, or we could theorize that the first star incident may have been something like a planetary conjunction, but the second star incident must have been a very different kind of sign. An angelophany, perhaps, an appearance of an angel, which to the Magi seemed to be like a star coming down very low and pointing the way to a house. The Bethlehem Star is a messianic theme with a twist. As Balaam saw Messiah as Jacob's star, the Magi saw his birthplace by the light of the Bethlehem Star. This is Yeshua in Context. I'm Derek Lehman.